We all want the government to protect us from pollution, not just to extend our lives, but because a clean environment is nice, makes our lives better. We've already made great strides. In much of America, the air is cleaner than it was 20 years ago. The water, too. We all support that. But how far do we want the government to go? Is there a point where we waste money trying to get things too clean? America's most expensive cleanup project is called Superfund. It's meant to clean up those toxic waste sites we've been talking about. Love Canal, Times Beach, 1,000 others. It's estimated the total cleanup will cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Is the money well spent? Well, let's look at one small Superfund site in Colorado. We think of Aspen as home of the jet set, great skiing, the good life. But Aspen, like much of the Rocky Mountains, was once home to lots of silver mines, like this one, Smuggler Mountain. 100 years ago, the Smuggler mine produced tons of silver. Today, most of it's closed, but its pollution remains. When you pull the silver out of ore, you're left with lots of lead. And tests have shown that in much of Aspen, the ground is loaded with lead. The lead can be a nasty poison. If enough of it gets into a child, it can interfere with coordination and lower IQ scores. But just because there's lead in the soil, does that necessarily mean it's harmful to the people? Chris Weiss thought so. He works as a toxicologist for the EPA.
Lead is poison and causes permanent brain damage. Even if a small amount of that material were absorbed into the blood, it would pose a problem, a serious problem for children.
So about 10 years ago, the Environmental Protection Agency warned the citizens of Aspen that they were in danger. In 1986, Smuggler was declared a toxic waste site, put on the Superfund list, and scheduled for cleanup. The EPA had ambitious plans. They'd remove 150 of these houses and then dig up all the dirt down to 4 feet, load that up onto dump trucks, and then those dump trucks, thousands of runs, would carry the dirt off.
I can't sleep at night. I wake up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
At first, people in Aspen were frightened about the lead and eager for the cleanup to begin.
I just can't stand it.
But then some started talking to other scientists who said the EPA had exaggerated the problem.
We called the Colorado School of Mines, and everybody we talked to said this is bull.
On your mark, get set, go!
Some residents, like Patty Clapper, who would have been forced to leave her home because she lives with her family right in the middle of the toxic waste site, began to feel the cleanup would be more dangerous than the lead in the soil. Digging it up might put lead dust in the air. And thousands of truck runs didn't sound safe either. How dangerous could the lead be, thought Patty, since all the neighborhood kids had spent years using the toxic waste site as their playground. Eventually, Aspen asked local doctors to investigate the EPA's reasoning. Was lead in the soil as big a problem as the EPA said?
Are you taking care of Kara?
Dr. Robert Hunter headed a committee of doctors who searched through old hospital records. They couldn't find any cases of lead poisoning.
You can't find it in the kids. You can't find it in pregnant mothers. And the fact is, nobody's sick around here from lead toxicity. If you want to go to the hospital, I'll show you sick people. It's because they fell skiing. If you're really worried about health hazards, we should stop skiing. Can you wiggle your toe up and down for me?
Skiing is voluntary. Breathing isn't. The government must protect us from that.
I think sometimes we have to protect ourselves against the government. The government at this point has taken a teeny bit of data and exploded it into an $8 million mistake.
That's my question.
The more research Aspen did, the more they talked back to the
Very
EPA.
strongly that you're telling me that you need to protect my children. I feel like that is my job.
I want to give you the
I
option.
can protect my children. I don't need the EPA to do that for me.
Their values are different than ours. They're willing to accept risks that EPA doesn't feel are appropriate. They want proof from us that these risks are really harming them. And we don't want the dead bodies.
Mark Alston, EPA Regional Supervisor, was Chris Weiss's boss.
Keep in mind that for 100 years, these folks have seen, lived in, and worked around this kind of mine
So they're
waste.
just blind to the risk? They just don't
I
want
don't
to
think
see
they're
it?
blind to it. I think they're comfortable
But
with
in
it.
Aspen, they've never found a problem.
I disagree.
After 6 years of arguing, the residents of this neighborhood finally persuaded some doctors to test their blood. Now, the government considers lead levels above 10 micrograms per deciliter risky. Chris Weiss feared many Aspen kids would have much more than that. The EPA's hope was that after the cleanup, 95% of the people would have lead levels below 10. Astoundingly, the Aspen test showed that the residents' lead levels were already below 10. They averaged 3. That's among the lowest blood levels recorded anywhere in America. More astounding, the EPA still refused to take Aspen off the Superfund list and said they would still dig up the neighborhood because the lead in the soil around Smuggler was still a potential hazard.
They're going to clean my children up to a 1 in a million risk. Life is a greater risk than that.
Sooner or later, even if you're a good scientist, you got to go outside and you got to look around and you got to look for signs of disease. Go look. There's no disease.
Maybe it's yet to come.
Aspen's been around since the end of the 19th century. We've been here for well over 100 years.
With the lead.
With the lead. We've got a real good track record, and all you have to do is review the record.
Land of the free, home of the brave, hostages of the EPA.
Finally, after Aspen's mayor threatened to stand in front of the government's bulldozers, the EPA announced it would postpone the cleanup to give Chris Weiss time to take Aspen soil, force-feed it to pigs, and then slaughter the pigs to see how much lead they absorb.
You have the power to force a cleanup.
We have the authority to force a cleanup. The Superfund law is an extremely powerful law.
Ironically, while much of this was going on, the head of the EPA was Bill Riley. Riley says he agrees with the people in Aspen who say the cleanup is unnecessary.
My position on that is leave them alone.
If you agree with them, why didn't you stop the EPA?
I think we finally did accommodate their proposals, and we did not force the removal of all of that
EPA
dirt.
is still fighting with them, saying ought to be removed.
I thought that, the agency had essentially accepted that analysis. If they haven't, they should have.
Well, finally, years after he left the EPA, and shortly after we first broadcast this report, the EPA did drop its demand that all the dirt be removed. Now Aspen officials just have to cover some of the old dirt with new dirt, and they must give the children regular blood tests to look for lead.
What I've told the EPA is if you want to save lives in this valley, build us a new road. Our road is what kills people here and maims people here, and it happens every month and it happens every year. And if you want to save us, build us a new road.
It's not what you're breathing or eating.
No, it's what you're driving.
Over the past 5 years, there have been 1,000 serious injuries on that road and 21 deaths. Yet little has been spent trying to make it safer.